Live from the Civic Center on South 3rd Street here in Bardstown. Good evening. My name is Tom Isaac, formerly with PLG TV, and I'm joined by Forrest Berkshire, editor of the Kentucky Standard, and by Kentucky Standard reporter Andy Patrick. We're going to be presenting the first of two debates here in a few moments with the county judge executive candidates in the Democratic primary. And of course, we'll be introducing themselves, but that's Kenny Fogle and Dean Watts being the incumbent. I have a couple of quick acknowledgments before we actually get started. Mr. Music, thank you for your help. Thanks to Wilson and Muir, sponsorship, and the City of Bardstown cable folks who are taking care of things on the head end. We also have Hannah Berman of the City of Bardstown, who is here as one of our camera crew. The rest of the crew, headed by John White, Matt Gordon. Scott Cederholm is going to be keeping tabs on the time. Also, we want to have Jamie Sizemore's presence acknowledged as well, because he's going to be helping us out as well. Our second debate will be between the county clerk Democratic candidates, Gil Brown and Jeanette Sidebottom, and that'll be starting around 7:15-ish or so. This first debate scheduled to go for an hour. And we had a flip of the coin backstage a while ago, and it was determined that Kenny Fogle will be opening the program with his opening statement, followed by Dean Watts. And then the closing statements will be Dean and then Kenny, just in that reverse order. Format is pretty simple and straightforward. You folks have been watching these for some time and listening to them, going back to the radio station days. Candidates will have 3 minutes for their opening statements. They don't have to take the entire 3 minutes, but don't be surprised if they do. Then each of the questions, which will be posed by Forrest and Randy, they'll have 2 minutes to respond. If they desire a rebuttal to a statement that their opponent might make, they do have to raise their hand, so I'll know to call on them, but then they will have 1 minute. And yes, it's possible to have a rebuttal to a rebuttal, but those will also be held to 1. Then 3 minutes for closing statements, and again, they don't have to take the entire 3 minutes. So let's welcome our two candidates for County Judge Executive in the Democratic primary, incumbent Dean Watts and the challenger Kenny Fogle. So we'll get things underway here with our questions in a moment, right after our opening statements. And again, as I mentioned, Kenny Fogle will be leading off with the opening statement. Kenny?
All right, thank you, Tom, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. My name is Kenny Fogle. I was born and raised here in Nelson County. My parents, Avon and Geraldine Fogle, raised out in the Holy Cross area. Graduated from Nelson County High School in 1973, where I met my high school sweetheart, Donna. We've been married about 43 years now. Got 2 children. Martin, he's in the Air Force out in Colorado. And my youngest son, Matthew, down in Jacksonville, Florida, is a personal fitness trainer. I've served several years in different capacities. Was in the Air Force for 25 years. And served a couple terms on the Nelson County School Board. And moved to United Way for 30 years in various capacities. And I'll get into that maybe a little bit later on. But my story for this particular race probably began about 40 years ago. Is when I first joined the Air Force, one of the reasons I joined the Air Force is I wanted to go to college. And I couldn't afford it, and the Air Force said they would pay for it, and I said, well, that's a great idea. So I joined the Air Force, and right after that went to college, and I was wanting to be an engineer, but in the first semester of pre-calculus, I realized that was probably not the best choice, and I had to change majors, and my major switched over to political science, where I studied mostly the Constitution, things of that nature. But the bad thing about college is they don't teach you the real life as much as you think they would. It's a lot of the idealistic and what should be done, how wonderful everything is, and you don't see the warts and all that kind of stuff. So after studying in college, I got all this passion about how government should be, how when I stepped out in the world, I'm going to make a change and make a difference. Well, then I realized when I got out in the real world, they didn't teach you about political action committees and lobbyists and how special interests spend a lot of money to influence government. They didn't teach you all that. You learned that on your own. And another thing they didn't teach you as well is how basically the citizen politician that was designed originally by George Washington and many of them back in the early days, that was quickly gone. It was become the career politician. And the career politician is the one that basically has defeated the citizen politician over the many years. And that's one of the things I want to talk about. I do commend my opponent for being the longest serving county judge in the history of Nelson County. But 7 terms, that's enough. I mean, it's too much now, and I think that's an issue that I really want to address. I want to serve 2 terms, no more. I mean, if I'm fortunate enough to win 2 terms, and I do believe strongly in term limits. And again, if you just think about that just for a second or two and let it sink in, 7 terms. I just think it's time.
All right, the opening statement from challenger Kenny Fogle. And going now to our incumbent, Dean Watts.
Thank you, Tom. Clarification, I'll be finishing up my 6th term as county judge. And
that's a math problem.
No, he's going for his 7th term.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I want to clarify. And I'd hate to think that the citizens of Nelson County would not have had a chance to re-elect Phyllis Mattingly as long as she served this community in an honest and effective way. So I disagree with my opponent on that issue of term. We have term limits. You all set that out there in the audience. As we begin this debate tonight, let's be very clear. I am the best candidate to defeat Republican challenger Don Thrasher in the fall. I have the experience and community support to win in the fall. I will continue to work to keep your county taxes low. I will continue to recruit good jobs for the citizens of Nelson County. Especially, we will work tirelessly for the folks at American Ingredients. This is my promise to you, and there's nothing any more important as a county judge is to make sure our citizens have a quality of life, and that involves a good job. Thank you.
All right, Dean Watts with his opening statement. Now, we'll be alternating questions between Forrest and Randy, and in some cases, I'm sure questions will be specific to one particular candidate, and others, we both will have an opportunity to respond. Well, I'm going to let Forrest, as the editor, and I'm sorry to say that the only guy that's wearing a tie sitting here at this table, getting the opening part.
So this, Judge, you will answer this question first?
Okay.
As to both candidates. If an election is a job interview, the first question someone might ask is, why should I hire you? What sets you apart from the other applicants? So, Dean Watts, why should the voters of Nelson County keep you in your job? And Kenny Fogle, why should the voters fire Dean Watts and hire you?
Okay. On the job interview, my response to that part of it would be, can you come to work every day and still make a difference? Can you unite the 5 magistrates and for a common goal? Can you come to the office every morning and look forward to come to the office and making a difference? And so that in itself, a positive difference that is, that itself is important to me, and I think it's important to the success of this county and the continuous ability to recruit new jobs and new factories into this community. But as a job interview, I think I can make a difference and continue to make a difference as judge executive.
Okay, and Kenny?
Well, to be clear, I don't hope to fire anybody. I mean, obviously, you know, it's an open position. I mean, I know he's the incumbent, but it's not his job. The job belongs to the people of Nelson County. So it's not really firing. It's basically just, as he mentioned earlier, reselecting every 4 years. That's what we do. That's the American system. So to me, I'm not looking to, that's the part about politics that I hate, is I hate the fact that I have to run against Dean. I absolutely hate that part, because I want to run because I think I'm the best person for the job, not because there's anything I've got against him or anything else. That is not it at all. My thing is I've been in community service for 30 years, whether it's been the Air Force, the military service, whether it's been service with the school board, whether it's been service with the government. I've worked in Frankfurt for 15 years in the transportation cabinet. I feel like I'm very qualified to understand how government works, and I feel I'm very qualified to understand how the political system works. I've been involved with the Democratic Party for many, many years. Right now I'm serving as vice chairman of the party. And it's just a lot of things that go into what you think community service is. And I know the most old trite statement most people make, I'm a people person. But I think, you know, you really think about it, that's what politics is all about. You're solving the problems that people bring to you, and I've been doing that all my life. When I was in the Air Force, I mean, I was the Command Chief Master Sergeant for the state of Kentucky. And that was my problem, that was my job. Every single day they brought issues to me that I had to work out. And to me, there's an answer to every problem. I mean, there's very rarely is there a no, because I don't see the world in black and white. I see a lot of gray area, I see a lot of solutions where you just really have to search for them sometimes. But working together, I've worked with people throughout my entire career that I just feel like, you know, able to work with people, able to see what a mission is and work the problem through to finality is the best way to do the job. And I don't look at it as a 9-to-5 job. It'll be 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. When I'm county judge, when you get elected to that position, you're there for the duration, and it's not coming to work every day. I'm at work when I wake up in the morning.
Okay. Now to Randy Patrick.
We got sound issues.
There's been a lot of discussion in recent months about leadership style. This is a question for both of you. Describe what your style of leadership is and how it would apply to making decisions.
Well, the old adage goes that I've learned, and I learned this the hard way. I learned this the hard way years ago when I was working in Frankfurt. As I was assigned to several people that were tremendous at their job. Well, I tried to micromanage them. I told every day I would give them a list of what they needed to do. And one day, my boss called me in and he says, "Kenny, we gave you some of the best people in the world to work with, and you're trying to tell them, trying to tell them."
Just me?
Just you.
That's for you.
Okay. Well, the thing was, I was trying to tell them how to do their job every day. And I finally learned that that wasn't the best way to operate. The best way to operate is find the best and brightest, surround yourself with people smarter than you, and let them do their work. Get out of their way. Now, you're there to help, you're there to guide, you're there to make sure that people don't do things that they shouldn't be doing. You're there to give the mission. You're there primarily to lead, but at the same time bring other people in. And I've said this over and over. If I'm elected, I would like to set up blue ribbon commissions. And what I mean by that is I've heard people say, "I've got a lot of issues I'd like to talk about." Well, that's fine. If you've got an issue you want to talk about, let's put a committee together, maybe a committee of only 2 or 3 people, maybe 20 people. But bring these people together, let them hash out the issues. If it's an indoor swimming pool, which I hear that all the time, I don't have a passion one way or the other for that, but people do. And if they want to do that, come and find out, how do you do that? How do you go about getting that? How do you recruit that? How do you build it? Where do you put it? How do you pay for it? And that's the big question. If it's going to be a burden to the taxpayers, it's a no-go from the beginning. But there's innovative ways to do things. You see the Yum Center down in Louisville, and it's sponsored by the Yum Center. You see the Papa John's Stadium, it's sponsored. You go to Elizabethtown and see their Aqua Center over there. There's sponsors all over the place over there. There's ways of paying for things and doing things without costing taxpayers money. And I want to be able to listen to anybody that's got an issue, bring it to us. And that to me is a style of leadership, is you guide the issue, but at the same time, let people come to you.
I want to make sure I can be heard this time. And I don't want to lose an opportunity like I did a few minutes ago and not be heard. Leadership styles. As a community leader, Kenny is right. You are a judge 24/7. And if you don't believe that, ask my wife anytime I go to Walmart or McDonald's. So that part is important. But leadership, the way that I've chosen to be the leader of the community is to empower good people, educated people on what they're doing, and empower them to do their job and cut through the bureaucratic tape. And the blue ribbon committees, when I hear that word, I get the cold chills. Because the blue ribbon committees we're elected to lead, and we're elected to make decisions. You know, it's easy to form this little task group over here and ask, them to make a recommendation. And some of that is good. But when you have a tough subject or a tough decision to make, it's important for you to make that decision based on the knowledge and research and experience that you find. Doesn't mean I go to individuals privately, quietly, and gather information and educate myself that way. When I hear blue ribbon committee, I had to write that down. That's passing the buck. That's all that's doing. And I'm not going to do that as judge. And we've been pretty darn successful the last 24 and a half years.
Rebuttal.
Well, he and I are definitely going to disagree on this one, because like I said, we got a brain trust here in Nelson County that's unreal. And I've talked to people I've been in the Rotary Club, I'm in several other organizations, and people, at least some of the smartest people in the world that I've dealt with in Nelson County. And I want them to have public input. I don't want to talk to them privately. And again, the passing the buck part would be if I decided, okay, whatever they decided, I'm going to go along with. That's not the case at all. The case is they'll bring the issues to me, both good, bad, negative, positive, whatever it takes. The final decision rests with fiscal court. As the executive of fiscal court, I would think I'd have some influence. I don't intend to vote on fiscal court. I've said that over and over. I think that's the magistrate's final decision. But as the leader of the community, obviously the buck stops with you at the top, and I'm not advocating that at all. I'm just saying I would welcome ideas. I welcome people to, and Scott keeps beeping at me there, so I'm going to quit and shut up.
You're going too long.
I know that. Tendency.
Real short rebuttal.
An extra minute, if you want.
Okay. There's one key element that, as a judge executive, that I've had to grow in, and that is listening. That's an art that a lot of people do not have. You know, it doesn't mean that you have to blurb out everything. It doesn't mean that you have to seek and find. If you just listen to your constituents, you can learn a lot. And that's all that's it.
Okay, and back to your course.
This question is going to go to Kenny first. Mr. Fogle, in a Facebook post, you referred to hearing about, quote, cronyism, corruption, and personal vendettas, as well as promising that you would not, quote, reward friends and punish enemies. You also wrote that if 1/3 of what you had heard was true, you felt compelled to speak up. So, Kenny, are you accusing your opponent of corruption? And if so, do you have any examples? And for Dean, have you made any decisions to benefit friends and punish enemies?
No. I'm not accusing my opponent of corruption, not in the least. But when you're a candidate, and I'll tell you this, you'll find this out when you're a challenger, and you get everything. And you talk to everybody, and I've had people come to my house, I've had people call me and say, oh, this is going on, that's going on. I don't know if it's true. And like I said, if I thought it was, then I would be the first one out there saying, here's what's going on. But, you know, anytime you get into politics, that tendency is always there. So you got to make that clear to people that you're against this stuff. You're against cronyism. You're against people doing anything, any kind of corruption. People are bringing things to me that, and again, if 1/3 of what people are telling me is true, yeah, I'd be alarmed. But I can't prove that, and I'm not even going to make an accusation that it's going on. But I've got people that I trust that say, oh, this is happening, that's happening, we don't do this, why is this happening? And obviously people are disgruntled. You get disgruntled people. When you're the challenger, you get all the disgruntled people, because obviously if they were happy, they'd be with already involved with government in some way. But you get the people that's been fired from jobs. You get people that's been overlooked for something. You get people that didn't get a contract that they thought they should have got, that they thought that they should have been allowed to bid on, and things of that nature. Again, I'm not going to accuse anybody of anything, because you got to have proof for that, and that's a very dangerous thing to do. And I've known my opponent for a long time. He's always been an honorable person, and I wouldn't dream of doing that. But I'd be remiss if people just came to me and said, Kenny, this is going, and I just sit there and just say, well, yeah, it's going up, or I'm not going to say a word about it. So I'm going to at least put it out there, and if somebody on Facebook wants to respond to it, that's what my hope was. My hope was that people would respond to it and say, okay, this is what's going on, this is what's going on. Some people just say, oh yes, I hear about this, but hearsay is not the same thing as proof. So no, I'm not accusing anything, but you know, there's always a possibility, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't at least look at the possibility that you reward your friends, and not necessarily punish your enemies, but you reward your friends.
Of course, my answer to your first response is no, no, no. Have I ever done anything illegal or reward my friends? The second thing, if a candidate puts something in writing, something like that in writing, it's in writing. And it's pretty disturbing when you see a candidate putting something like that in writing, and when they're really not talking about the issues, the jobs, and the opportunities that we have to offer in this community. And all this little petty stuff is so immature. Thank you.
Well, obviously, obviously, corruption and cronyism is not petty. And again, I put it in writing, and, yeah, like I said, there could be proof, I'm not, yeah. But if I get beat, now if you beat me and you run against Jack Hurst, you might find the answer on some of that.
That sounds like a good source.
Well, it is one source, and so I'm not gonna, I'll let him do that, because that's what he likes to do.
Thank you.
And, you know, he's running as an independent, which doesn't get him into the debate unless
It'll be fun.
itself,
He won't speak with us anyway.
Okay,
That's right.
I guess that's a moot point. Okay, over to Randy.
Is county government transparent enough? And if it's not, what would you do to improve the transparency?
Well, transparency means a lot of things to a lot of people. And again, I know we've talked about this before, and it's something that's an issue that is debatable as to what open meetings are. I mean, when people talk before a meeting, is that illegal? Is that immoral? Is it wrong? You know, some people say no, some people say it is. But to me, open meetings is I served on the Nelson County School Board years ago, and one of the compliments we got from there was a reporter that came to us one time and said, one of the compliments they gave us, they said, we can tell you people don't talk before the meeting, because when you get to the meetings, you all go in 15 different directions, you yell at each other, it gets emotional, and you can tell that there's nothing ever been discussed before you get there, because it's right out in the public. Everything you say and do is right there available for everybody to talk about. And they didn't necessarily mean that as a compliment, but I put it that way because that's the way it should be. And when you go to a meeting, fiscal court meeting, and you present an issue and it's voted on within a matter of minutes and basically unanimous or close to unanimous, it's kind of hard to believe that some discussion hadn't went on ahead of time. So again, I'm not saying it's illegal, because every time I say it is, people tell me it's not. But I know I've talked to them before, they said, well, the magistrates need to be educated. The magistrates don't need to be educated. They're 5 very capable individuals who can educate themselves. All of them are grown people that can go out and study their own issues, and they can do their own thing. They don't need me to tell them what to do. They don't even need me to explain what's going on. Their issues are pretty evident, and I'll send them the packet the week ahead of time, say, here's what the issues are, do your study. Now, if you come in and you didn't do your homework, that's your fault. But what my job is to make sure when the meetings are run well and that everything is above board. And when I say transparency as well, there should be no question as to how somebody came to a conclusion. When you come to a conclusion on something, you should not be able to, somebody wonder later, well, how did they come to that conclusion? Why did they do the things they do? That's transparency. There's no questions.
And Judge, your take on transparency?
From day one, you know, as a judge, you have your training on open records and open meetings. Many times during that training process, there was questions from us in the audience. And Scott, don't get that thing stopped.
I think you're running out of your time.
I'm teasing Scott. You know, you have your training sessions, and even in those training sessions, from person to person, you'll see a little different interpretation of that law, of those laws. And the main thing is to abide by the spirit of the law. And I was taught that a long time ago, not just in open records and open meetings training, but other aspects of life. But I want to go back to the educational component for all of us. It's important for me as a judge to present the magistrates with enough information and gathering. I'm in the office every day, and they're not. It's important for me to gather as much information as I can and send that in advance of our court meetings so we can have a decision made based on solid facts and figures and information. So I think that's important. You have to have, when we come and vote on issues, many times they've had that 4 to 6 weeks in advance. So it goes smooth that way better. People don't, the community doesn't want to see us bickering back and forth. Now, because my other opponent, Don, talked a little differently earlier, but we're okay to disagree on that. But my style as judge executive has been to inform the magistrates and educate the magistrates like they do me. If they find information, they can send the information. It's important, and I think our meetings are good. If anybody thinks we're hiding anything, just stick around before and after the meeting. We're talking about our families, we're talking about our friends, we're talking about the ball games, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's not a lie detector going off with you. Okay, then, of course.
Judge, you'll answer this question. Some candidates in other races have publicly called for separating the joint city-county planning commission because they think the cities are overrepresented and do not reflect the views of county residents. Do you favor splitting the planning commission or keeping it as it is, or some other variation, and why? If you think changes need to be made, what changes? And please include as many specifics as you can. And as I said, this first goes to Judge Watson.
Okay. First, I am in favor of keeping the planning commission with the representation from the county at 5. The city of Bardstown, I believe, has 3. Fairfield and Bloomfield and New Haven each have 1. So I think it's a total of 11. As far as the planning commission itself, remember, everyone lives in Nelson County, whether you're in Fairfield, whether you're in Bardstown, whether you're in New Haven, everyone lives in Nelson County. The planning commission makes decisions based on law, based on the facts and the law that's presented. And so it doesn't matter which part of the county you represent, you're making a decision based on what the law states that you can do. So I think the planning commission operates within the guidelines of the law. There's always some room for improvement if anybody has any recommendations. In fact, over the last 15 years, there's been major improvements, or changes and improvements to the planning commission. And I would not be in favor of splitting the planning commission like some of the other candidates have. I think someone used the word repeal and replace, but I would not be in favor of that.
Okay.
That would be my words, the repeal and replace part. But I do agree with him. I do not believe you need to separate from the city and the county, because the planning commission, again, they're smart enough to know the difference. They're smart enough to know what's in the city, what's in the county, and they follow whichever rules apply is applicable to that part. Now, the repeal and replace part, I guess that was sort of something that I come up with, because planning and zoning has been a thorn in people's sides for years, and it's not because it's a bad thing. We need planning and we need zoning. I mean, there's no question about that. But in many cases, it has been negative, had a negative impact. I know I faced it in personal reasons. I mean, whether it's frontages out in the country, whether you can put a driveway at a certain place, whether you can put a building in your backyard, how far it can be from the house. You know, just so many little petty things to me that when you say repeal, I say take it down to the bare minimum and start over. Bring in realtors, bring in land developers, bring in magistrates, bring in just ordinary citizens and say, okay, what has worked over the last 50 years in planning and zoning? What has not worked? And let's just start it all over. Yeah, I don't blame the people in planning and zoning. They get a lot of grief. They get a tremendous lot of grief. Because, oh, I've heard it so many times. Oh, you got to get rid of those people. No, you don't. You've got to give them better rules. As he said, they only follow the rules that the fiscal court and the state legislature gives them. And if we give them rules that are too hard to deal with, that's the rules they're going to follow. So again, planning and zoning needs to be fixed. And when I say fixed, I mean strip it down to the bare bones and start all over. You talk about planning. In that planning comprehensive guide, it says right in there, it's got several things that this county needs to be doing. We're not doing it. It says in there we need 2 indoor swimming pools. Show me the first one. Because it's one of the recommendations this a county this size should have is 2 indoor swimming pools. It's got a bunch of other things in there. Some of it we meet, some of it we don't. So what's good to have planning if you're not going by their guidelines? Planning is very important because you got to figure out what you're going to be doing in 2020, 2030, 2045. We've got to be thinking ahead. Zoning is good to make sure farmland and industry and private people are not living on top of each other. But the landscape has changed in the last 50 years, and we got to move up to date and not only just band-aid it, we got to start all over and find out what works and make it work for us.
Please rebuttal. The fact of the matter is that the rules and regulations have been changed in the last 20 years at least 3 times. And it usually comes from a citizen group of magistrates, council, and private citizens that get together and make some of those changes. So that's been done several times. But usually this comes up about every election cycle. And usually planning and zoning is great and okay until it affects me. Until it affects the driveway that I want to put in. or the neighbor next door that's got some billy goats, and I didn't buy into that subdivision, they have billy goats beside me. But it is funny how that comes around each election cycle. And we're only one of 26 counties in the state of Kentucky that has countywide zoning. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Well, the thing is, when you get into zoning, is you're putting into things. Look at residential housing, just in the last 20 years, how it has dipped. I mean, we had a high many years ago.
What was that?
Residential housing.
Is what?
Is dipped considerably over the new housing permits has dipped over the last many years. Simply because
construction.
New housing construction. Real estate agents are having a hard time finding new houses. I mean, when people are moving to Bardstown or moving to Nelson County, they're having a hard time finding houses. And a lot of that's due to some of the restrictions on our planning and zoning. If we could loosen up some of those restrictions, we could have more housing built. Obviously, that leads to the property tax roll. You know, if you got more people on the roll of property tax, maybe you wouldn't even need an occupational tax. I mean, maybe we could lower that rate because you can offset it. But again, I'm hearing this from real estate agents and developers constantly that there's so many restrictions now, they're going to Spencer County, Bullitt County, or somewhere else to build houses because they just have too many rules and regulations they have to deal with here, and they simply don't like it. And again, I'm no expert on this. If I was, I'd sit here and tell you exactly how to fix it. That's why I want to bring in a Blue Ribbon Commission and talk about it and put it together right.
I don't rebuttal to the rebuttal, which is fine. It's not just rebuttal, it is in some cases clarification too. Dean?
Let me just clarify something. In the last 5 years, this is important now. In the last 5 years, there's been 800 new housing permits issued in Nelson County. 800. And no matter where those houses are going to be built, whether it's in a city or outside the corporate limits, the county gets the tax rate no matter where they are. So the fact of the matter is, the county's going to get that tax rate whether it's in a city or the county. But 800 is a pretty good amount of houses being built in this county.
Okay, moving along. Randy Patrick.
Nelson County is a fairly racially diverse community, but that's not reflected in the county workforce. What can the county judge do to make the workforce, the county offices more racially diverse?
Let's go to Dean for the first answer on that.
That was one of the questions that was presented to me in 1993 with a gentleman that promised that he would vote for me if I would put more African Americans to work in the county system. And I took that seriously because there's one thing that I will do. I'll hire people first, no matter what color they are, and then based on qualifications and experience. And then I've actually, if you remember, a former employee of ours, James Phillips, Grover Phillips, and I have worked together on that issue several times. And we're open for applicants from all walks of life to come and apply, and actually have gone out and recruited African American people to come to work for us, and just not able to get the quantity of workforce that we need in the population that we have.
Okay.
Well, I can't really add much to that because, like I said, I don't believe in quotas, and I don't believe in that. And if he's done the recruiting that he says he's done, I don't doubt that he has, then I think he's done his job, because I think that's what you have to do. You have to do job fairs, go out and try to reach out in the communities, maybe go to the communities where people are that of different racial or areas of that nature. Maybe, like I said, have a job fair to let people know what's available and how to apply for the job. You know, a lot of times I think maybe a job comes open, people don't know it's been open until after the job's somebody's been hired into the job. So yeah, that part would be very important. I think going out and recruiting and making people more aware of what jobs are available and reaching out to the community. I hear that a lot as people say, you know, well, you got to go to where the people are. And maybe that's true. And that's something that I think has to be considered. If we're only recruiting in certain places, we got to remember everybody doesn't travel to the same places. So it may be back to reach out and maybe be a little more proactive in reaching out to people. Again, you're not guaranteeing anybody anything based on race or any other status, but at the same time, make sure you reach out to them, let them know what's available, and walk them through the process. And if it's maybe a little more advanced recruiting, and if he's doing that, then that's great. And if not, then maybe we ought to be doing a little bit more.
Just another comment. You know, I am open for help. You know, no person has all the answers as far as the judge executive, but in that area, it's been very sensitive to me, and I've had conversations with our leadership team within the county system, and so I'm open for help. If anybody in the audience, anybody in the community wants to help with that situation, I'll be glad to listen. Thank you.
All right. And Forrest.
Kenny, you'll answer this first. You called the county occupational tax the most unfair of all, and you called for rates to be lowered or for it to be eliminated. My question for you would be, how would you make up for the nearly $1.2 million in reduced tax revenues that would come from eliminating it or lowering it?
Well, first of all, would be I'm sorry.
And for the judge, because he gets a question too. Do you agree the occupational tax is unfair, and could it be eliminated or adjusted to be made more fair?
Well, it can't be eliminated. Obviously, it can't be eliminated, because if you did, then that'd leave a vacuum. The city would take it over, and you'd be back in the same shape you're in right now. But an unfair tax, when you're taxing the first $15,000 on people, I mean, it's the poorest people in the community. I mean, $75 might not sound like a lot, but $75 is a lot of money to some people. And to me, it's been an unfair tax even before he was elected. I mean, the first time, and when it first come in, it was handled poorly the way it was enacted, and the cap was terrible that they had a cap on it, because somebody that's making $15,000 a year to be paying the same into it, somebody making $150,000 a year. I mean, where's the fairness in that? Obviously, there's nothing fair in that. Now, as far as where you make up the revenue, that's the tricky part, obviously. You know, whether you do that, and again, if there's some way to advance property, with more people paying property taxes, that's where I would hope to see that. Again, that goes back to our planning and zoning question a few minutes ago. Is there's more people out there paying property taxes with more housing, more areas, then again, residential houses pay a little bit more than agricultural land does. So if you've got a small farm, it's 10 acres before, now there's 10 tracts on to people paying property taxes, that's going to go up considerably. And not only that, at the 1.2 million, you can take about a third of that for administrative costs. And also on top of that, if you take that administrative cost, that knocks it down to what's $700,000, $800,000. And on top of that, enforcement. It is very hard to enforce the occupational tax, and I know that for a fact because I've been involved in several issues over the years where people say, I just don't report it. And people, if you don't go out and check with them and go out and enforce it or investigate, which also costs money, then again, there's another expense. So you're not talking quite $1.2 million. You may be talking $500,000, somewhere in that neighborhood, time you factor in all the administrative and enforcement costs. And then, yeah, you got to come up and figure out how to make up for that. So again, maybe you don't eliminate it. Maybe you don't take it to zero. But there's a lot of things. It is an unfair tax, and if there's a way to take it to zero, I will do it. I just got to figure out how to do it.
Judge.
Thank you. Actually, in 1993, when I ran for this job the first time, I agree with Kenny's response here. It's the most unfair tax. Unfortunately, with the cap on it and the population, there's a state statute that says when your population goes past 30,000 people, and we went past 30,000 people officially a few years after I took over office. So that statute says if you pass or change your local occupational tax, then you've got to credit the city, as Kenny was talking about. You've got to credit the city that $75 back. If a person works in the city, you'll get credit. So that $75 will go away to 65% of the taxpayers to us. So our hands have been tied to remove that cap because of that statute. Now, let me go back to the administrative costs that Kenny was talking about. The occupational tax brings in $1.2 million. You have less than 4.5 or 5% administrative costs. Much less than 300. Maybe you might have 50,000 at most, including benefits with a girl that takes care of that. So the administrative cost he's talking about is not there. And as far as trying to catch up with the property tax rate, you're capped at a 4% growth in revenue every year on property. We've got that with the 800 homes that I just talked about. And so we've actually had to lower our property tax and lower our personal property tax as well because of that formula and that 4% cap. But there is no, just write this down, there is no $300,000, $200,000, or $100,000 administrative costs, less than 5%.
And again, the last part of that, obviously, you talked about the having to share with the city. I have no problem with that. The city went ahead and knocked it one anyway, so now people in the city are paying 2 taxes for many people. So if you share with Bardstown, you share with New Haven, you share with Bloomfield, you share with Fairfield, everybody comes out ahead, and that's the key to it all. Are we working together? I mean, there's ways of talking to each other, all the cities in the county, and say, okay, what can we do with this occupational tax? We can dedicate it to something. It doesn't have to go into a general fund. That could be a dedicated tax that we could say, we all got one big idea, we could come up with something great. The mayor of Bardstown, Bloomfield, Fairfield, New Haven, and the county judge get together. We could do something enormous and something really good with the tax if that was the case. But again, the occupational tax is an issue I think has been revisited again. As he mentioned, I do remember, he ran on that issue in 1993, saying he was going to eliminate it.
I did not say that.
I got the
I said I
form.
removed the cap.
I think
I said I removed it.
Well, I've got the paper at home somewhere, but I've got because I ran an advertisement several years ago. And so we'll debate on that later, but otherwise he wasn't for it.
I remember Mike Appleby wanting his court had put that in.
Yes.
And it seems to me, Judge, I remember you saying that you would dump it.
I've got the newspaper clippings. I'll stand corrected if I'm wrong.
Okay, well, there may be some stale tape back there at PLG somewhere, possibly. Okay, well, let's move on. And again, just a reminder that we'll be taking our last 6 minutes in this broadcast for the 2 closing statements. And that means we probably have time for about maybe one more question here. Ready?
Okay. Besides an indoor pool facility, which we were going to get into with the next question, if we have time for that.
Just roll that into this one.
Yeah, is the county providing enough publicly accessible recreation opportunities? And should the county be doing more in that area? And if so, how? In what way?
Okay, Judge, if you're the incumbent, so you have to answer that.
I'll be the firing line first. We do not have enough recreation areas. Obviously, recreation for the youth and the sports leagues, we're managing that fairly well now. There are many other forms of recreation that we're not able to deal with, primarily because we haven't had the appetite to raise taxes. And we could probably go out and build and raise money to build a new indoor swimming pool. Be all in favor of it. Anybody's got a plan, you bring it to me. But I want the second part of that plan to be, how are you going to sustain that operation? How are you going to put, and I've done analysis on that, you're going to put between $500,000 and $700,000 in operational costs. Because fees will not pay for it. If you don't believe me, ask the city of Lebanon. When Lebanon built their indoor pool, they received a $500,000 grant from Wendell Ford at the time, and they raised the other $500,000. And they're subsidizing their indoor pool between $250 and $275 every year. And that's been several years since I've looked at it. It might be even more now. But if anybody's got a plan, I am open for suggestions.
Okay, Kenny, just recreation in general and
Recreation in general, no, we're nowhere near enough. We need, I know I've heard people talk about having a water park and things of that nature. But again, going back to the indoor pool, what I'm looking at is much more than that. I'm looking at an indoor facility. A pool might be in it. But we're looking at kids, they're a little different today than they were years ago when I was a kid going out and riding a horse or riding a bicycle. You don't see as much of that. They're gaming. They're playing video games, or they're doing something that I can't explain because I'm not a kid. But I see my grandkids, they'll sit on the couch all day long and they never leave that device. So a good supervised place where they can do that would be wonderful. Talks about how do you pay for it. Well, yeah, initially you pay for it with certain things such as grants and things of that nature. But Lebanon's a little different from Bardstown. I mean, the climate in Lebanon's a whole lot smaller area than Bardstown is. Marion County is a whole lot more spread out than we are. So I think we could sustain it. Not on fees. We couldn't do it simply on fees. We'd have to do it on other things as well. I mean, there's things such as sponsorships, as I mentioned earlier. There's other ways of paying for things that people get. And the one I talked to just a little while back was a doctor. And I don't know, I've never researched this. So again, it's not something I can put in concrete. But he says he's been giving prescriptions for people to go to the pools for arthritis and things of that nature. So I don't know if health insurance may even be able to pay for it. So that, again, it's something you have to look into. Elizabethtown's got a beautiful facility over there. Seem to be maintained it every year. I don't know if they put much tax dollars in it or not. The judge may know that more than I do on that. But again, it's a beautiful facility. It's loaded with sponsors. And it's not a one-time sponsor. Every year they go out and get sponsored. And I did this with United Way for so long. I did it when I was at the radio station. I learned you don't just survive just on regular money coming in. You've got to get out and hustle for it. You've got to get out and get sponsors and people, and they get a trade-off. They get their name on something, they get advertising, we get their money. And at the same time, there's a lot of innovative ways to raise money besides just raising taxes. Raising taxes is the easiest, actually it's the laziest way of raising money for something, because it's easy. You can go in and say, okay, we're going to raise taxes on people, and they may scream about it, but eventually you'll be able to get it done. But again, there's other ways of getting things done, and yes, we need more recreation for our young in Nelson County.
For clarification.
Yes, I want to go back to an example of what the Elizabethtown Park and Recreation lost last year. Tax dollars had to subsidize their park $1.3 million. $1.3 million. The city of Elizabethtown's doing everything in their power today to get it out of their hands. They're going to turn it back over to tourism to operate and run, and allow them to do it, in hopes that they can cut that in half. There's a story in the News Enterprise about that, pretty interesting story. Thank you.
And of course, I know there's a couple of other topics we wanted to try to get to. We probably have to jump through a hoop to do it, but the Stephen Foster story and the jail questions are probably at the top of my mind.
Yes, I want to make sure to get this in. And Judge, this will go to you first.
Okay.
The county stepped in to save the Stephen Foster drama when the state was shut down by the state. It looks like the county will become more involved with the drama. Should the county have stepped in? Should the county do more to support the drama? And if so, how far and for how much?
And Tony, you'll get a shot at that as well.
Obviously, I went in and asked with both feet and met with the folks at tourism, the mayor, myself, Senator Higdon, Chad McCoy, and the amphitheater was going to be shut down. And going into that meeting, I thought of a solution. A solution was let the county go to our constituents and we'll raise private money to this project. And we're getting ready to kick off that campaign. I would not have changed a thing. You know, when the other guy sitting across the table has the purse strings, and his purse strings have already been shut, then you have to act. And that Stephen Foster drama is so important to this community, that the 60 years that we're going to have the show this year, and by the way, we're getting real close to having all of our permits in place to do so. It is so important to this community. Our heritage is now dependent upon it. The history of it is important, and I would go at it again the same way.
Well, I'd go at it in a way, but I wouldn't go in the way he did. Ironically, I'd already met with the Stephen Foster board before they shut it down and talked to them about what I wanted to do when I became judge. And talked to them again later after that, and basically it was never about the Stephen Foster story as much as it was about the amphitheater. And I want to keep the Stephen Foster story alive. And I mentioned that I would like to see them do it. Maybe cut back the Stephen Foster story a few days a week, rather, because I was on the Stephen Foster board for several years. And you made your money on the concerts, on the Monday night concerts. Your second show made a lot of money. Stephen Foster usually is what had to be subsidized. You could not survive on Stephen Foster's story alone, just couldn't make the money. Wasn't getting the crowds. So what I went down and approached them, said I would, as county judge, I'd like for the county to own the facility, lease it to the Stephen Foster Drama Association, but they would do limited time. They would do their second show. They would also manage the concerts, which I'd like to see more of those. Maybe not just the regional concerts, but local talent. There'll be karaoke night down there or something. But again, that goes back to just a simpler what I was talking about with the recreation board, or building I was talking about. Having a facility that people can go have something to do, and the Stephen Foster story would be obviously one of the main attractions, but it wouldn't be the attraction. The Stephen Foster story, it's got a rich heritage. Like I said, I served on the board for several years, so I know what it means to the community. but also know that you have to make money. You have to survive. And you survive on the concerts, and again, you're dependent on weather. Two rainouts, and you're done for the year. So we got to do some more effort, more work down there, and I don't know what the plans are, but it's definitely got to have to cover that stage. It's definitely going to have to be covered because I had too many artists back out because they don't want to play on an outdoor stage and their equipment get ruined. And so that is something you have to certainly look at. There's a lot of money got to go into this, and the sustainability, again, as he goes back to the pool, the same thing with them. You can't just break even every year and just struggle to make it, and that's what they've been doing. Unfortunately, it's been a struggle. It was almost to close before this ever happened.
Okay, I'm going to go slightly off our script here and see if we can work the jail, and I think that's an important issue that we haven't gotten to. But if we could keep our responses maybe in the neighborhood of a minute,
Have you back
2 minutes. The jail has been in the news quite a bit, in some ways in negative. Is our jail adequate for the needs of Nelson County? And if you think it's not, what does need to be done? And how should we address the overcrowding issue? Judge?
Yeah, I get that one first. Oh, that's the first one. I'm prepared on that subject, but in a couple of different ways. The jail was built to hold about 105 people. The population of the jail has changed dramatically over the last couple of years. We have so many more female prisoners now than we had in the past. Our jail is not adequate at this time. We are actually researching and looking at other jails as we speak. Now, what you got to be cautious about going out and building a new jail, and we will be building a new jail, by the way, in the near future. When I say near, there's a lot of planning has to do. And by the way, the state has to approve your jail. And location, the building, the way it's built, the flow of the jail, the safety features, and so forth. But the jail itself was built for 104. We were holding 107. That's like taking a classroom that's made for 25 or 30 students and sticking 40 in, 50 in it. And you cannot adequately run a jail that overcrowded. The whole state's dealing with all across the Commonwealth because of the #1 issue, and that's the heroin epidemic. And it's not that they're in there particularly because they overdosed, they've gone out and stolen something to keep the habit up. But that being said, it's important to have a new facility, and we're working on that.
Okay, good.
Well, new facility is a possibility. I mean, you always say, and he's right, that may be what we have to do because we are overcrowded. But is it necessarily we overcrowded because we've got, it's been adequate, or we got too many people in the jail, which is basically the same thing. I went out with the sheriff's office a few months ago just to ride around with them for a day, and they arrested a couple of people while I was out, and people that have been out on warrants, and most of it was doing with meth labs or something of that nature. Well, you got people in jail for that, and they go in and they go out. They go in, they go out. I mean, it's the return rate of a prisoner at this jail, I think, is up around 70 or 80%. Most of them are in there for drug issues. We got high technology now. Today is a different world than it used to be. Brick and mortar is still around, but we also got little units we can put on people's ankles. We can do home incarceration. It costs a little money at first. You're going to have to figure out a way to pay for it, maybe grants, maybe some other way. But you've got to find a way to stop putting people in jail for every single little reason and find a way to do some kind of alternate punishment of some sort. And again, I'm not in the judicial system, and I'm not going to speak for the judges because judges and lawyers, they have their own way of doing things. But that's my opinion on what we should be looking at, and I will voice that opinion quite often.
Okay. Now we go to our closing statements, and again, you have as much as 3 minutes to take if you want to take all 3. And as we announced earlier, Judge will be giving the opening closing statement, and then Kevin.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you all for being here tonight, everyone that took the time out of their schedule to be here. As we continue to move this county forward, I ask for your continued support and vote. Have the experience and the track record to continue to provide this county with honest, positive, and progressive leadership. Working every day to keep your taxes low. And perhaps, just as important, I am, again, the best candidate to defeat the Republican in the fall, Don Thrasher. I am that best candidate. I really believe that. And And it's the choice of the people today to consider what I would call myself a fiscal conservative or a self-professed liberal, as Kenny put it in his book. Thank you.
All right, well, that concludes our opening debate of two that
You got one more.
this evening.
Got to close
You
it.
got a rebuttal, I'm sorry.
Hey, you cut me out there, Tom.
I just spaced totally through that. I thought, man, that.
We're doing right. I won't run you too far over, but again,
You got the working microphone up here.
well, I thought about, when I sat up here, I thought about, I'll just read the preamble of the Constitution or something. You do something catchy so get voters' attention. But this is too serious. And I seriously mean this. I've been in community service all my life. And whether it's been military service, I learned so much for 25 years in the military. I retired as a Chief Master Sergeant. And I think the main thing you learn while you're there is not only leadership, they drill that through your head every day, but teamwork. And you learn how to get along with people. You learn how to get a mission. You learn if you look behind you, if you don't have anybody following you, then obviously you're doing something wrong. So you've got to get a buy-in to just about anything you do. You determine what your mission is, bring people on board, and you learn a lot. Like I said, my community service, both the school board, with the transportation cabinet in Frankfurt, 30 years with United Way. And if you want to go overtime, that probably wouldn't boost me, because I can sit here and preach about the United Way. We raised over $4 million for this community over the last 30 years. Didn't cost 1 red cent to the county taxpayers. So again, I can't argue with that, the effectiveness of United Way. He mentions the word liberal and conservative. I've always said I'm a very fiscal conservative, have been all my life. I'm pro-life. And people say, well, how can you be a Democrat and pro-life? Well, pro-life means more than just anti-abortion. Pro-life can mean, you from a cradle to grave, it's all the quality of life. So there's a lot of things that go on with that. As far as being a liberal, who stood up for the teachers in Frankfurt? It wasn't the conservatives. Who stood up for the unions in Frankfurt? It wasn't the conservatives. So you can put labels on things all you want to. I'm a liberal on some things. I'm a conservative on other things. I'm down the road. So if you can put a label on me, you're doing a fine, good job, because I don't know what I am, to be honest with you, as far as that goes. Thank you very much. I appreciate you all giving me the opportunity. If you can find your way to vote for me on May 22nd, I would absolutely appreciate it, and I would not let you down. I would show up every day to work. You show up for me on the 22nd of May, I'll show up for you the next 4 years.
Okay, Kenny Fogle in his closing statement, and thanks to Kenny and Dean Watts, the incumbent, for participating in our first of several debates that we've got coming up over the next several days, including one that will be coming up here in just about 15 minutes, and that will be for County Clerk, Gail Brown and Jeanette Sidebottom, the two Democrats are vying for that position. We want to thank Wilson and Muir, underwriting sponsor for the debates, not only this evening, but for Wednesday, Thursday, and then next Monday as well. Also thanks to Mr. Music for their help, City of Bardstown cable crew, our crew, and that includes John White, Matt Gordon, Scott Cedarholm, Jamie Sizemore, and on loan to us from the city of Anna Bowman. I can't even read my own writing. So do stay tuned. Now, this debate will be rebroadcast the weekend before the primary. You'll have to check the paper or PLG for the exact time, but it will be on again. So if you guys want to watch yourself,
probably not.
You know what you're going to say. Well, this is Tom Isaac speaking, and I want to thank Forrest and Randy for their participation tonight as well. And we will be back in about 15 minutes.
Thank you. Let's do that.
Want me to leave these here probably?
Yeah.
Since mine was defunct.
Technology doesn't like you. The last time we debated, I think you got they buzzed you or something.